It was when King Bagyidaw ascended the throne that the Konbaung Dynasty was at its zenith. Not counting the brief conquest of Simbushin, the country hadn't been as large since the reign of King Bagyidaw in the 16th century. But as the peak of their power was reached, Bagyidaw's time on the throne would also see the beginning of the end. He had been born in 1784, the son of Prince Thado Minsa, who in turn was the eldest son and heir to King Bodao Paya. When his father suddenly died in 1809, the 23-year-old Bagyidaw found himself heir to the throne and would be elevated as king without opposition when his grandfather died 10 years later. The country that he inherited shared a long but vaguely defined border with British India to the west, and as the British were alarmed by the Burmese expansion into Manipur, Assam and Arakan, they would support rebellions in these borderlands. The first years of Bagyidaw's reign would be spent suppressing them, but eventually his favorite general, Bandula, convinced him that in order to consolidate the gains in the west, a decisive victory against the British was needed, and who knows, perhaps he could even take over eastern Bengal. The war broke out on the 5th of March 1824. Initially, the Burmese forces, being more used to the terrain, managed to beat back the better equipped British and marched into Bengal. This caused great panic in nearby Calcutta, the capital of British India, and so they changed their strategy. Instead of fighting on harsh terrain, the British decided to take the fight to the Burmese mainland. On the 11th of May, a naval force of 10,000 men, led by Archibald Campbell, entered the port city of Yangon, which took the Burmese by surprise. Bagyidaw ordered General Bandula to march the majority of his men back home to meet the British, and they were subsequently soundly defeated in December while trying to take back Yangon. The war continued for little over a year longer, but eventually the Burmese had to agree to British demands. The Treaty of Yandabo was signed in February 1826 and ceded Assam, Manipur, Arakan, as well as most of Tenasserim to the British. The treaty also forced the Burmese to pay a sum of £1 million, which would have been considered a colossal sum even in Europe at the time, and which would leave the royal treasury bankrupt for years to come. Another part of the treaty had them exchange diplomatic representatives, and the uninvited British resident in Ava would serve as a daily reminder of their defeat. The king could never come to terms with this humiliating loss, and for a long time he had hoped that the British would give back some of their territories. In the end, all he got was a small valley neighbouring Manipur. Once a great lover of theatre and boat racing, Bagyidaw now grew ever more reclusive. He suffered from repeated bouts of depression, and after 1831 he became increasingly susceptible to mental instability. Real power devolved into the hands of one of his queens and her brother, and in February of 1837, Bagyidaw's brother Tharawadi rebelled, and 2 months later Bagyidaw was forced to abdicate. His queen and her brother were executed, and the former king was kept under house arrest until his death on the 15th of October 1846, at the age of 62.